So the way I like to kind of talk through a pitch deck is to give you a little introduction into me. So what I would say here is, hello, my name is Rahir Rahman. I'm the founder and CEO of Turn. I've spent the better part of the last decade working with the contingent workforce, otherwise known as 1099 workers. You see them as your drivers for Uber, your delivery folks for Amazon, and even today, some of your nurses at hospitals. Increasingly, the world's largest companies are relying heavily on contingent workers or contract workers. Yet the mechanisms to source, screen, and manage those workers is really a mess. What we do at Turn is we centralize all of that capability into one platform. In the last 15 months, we've been able to scale up to 100 different companies in 30 industries, supporting over 100,000 workers. And now with that, I'll love to jump in. So what I did there to help you guys is I created a hook. So I created a way for me to tie what I'm about to tell you and get you interested, as well as try to demonstrate some level of metrics or success, so that as you guys are thinking, you're an audience, you'll pique their interest with a couple things. At your age, there are things that are relevant to your life. Family members, mission statements that resonate. And then the metrics are kind of whatever you guys can determine are important for you. I'm sorry, I keep looking this way because all of you guys are on my right side. Probably look ahead. But that being said, I'll jump into the presentation. So the key problem, there is a growing demand for contingent labor, and yet there's an increasing pool of workers. Yet there's no new acquisition technology to find that talent. This is, kind of, if you look at over a longitudinal study over the last 10 years, you'll see how contingent workers will soon outpace W-2 workers. And this is independent contractor versus full-time workers. Employers today are wasting billions of dollars trying to source this talent. It's very expensive to acquire, and it's very difficult to filter talent. It's very hard to know if someone is a part-time contract worker, full-time contract worker, or hobbyist. What we want to do is, change the way traditional talent organizations or talent employers are found. What they use today is basic intent. So they use radio, television, Craigslist, social media, and all they're really finding is intent. They know that person A is interested in working, person B is interested in working for them, but they don't really know anything else. What we want to do is radically change the way employers source talent by bringing in three key areas: intent, identity, and experience. We do that by developing what's called a ladder-up strategy, three products that are built on top of each other iteratively to create a new talent sourcing technology. That's identity screening, data sharing, and worker sourcing. In the beginning, the way we start is we built an identity screening product that's specifically for the 1099 ecosystem. It's better, it's cheaper, it's faster. We combine that by what we call data sharing, which utilizes a proprietary exchange through an API where we're able to capture important performance information on a worker. That's things like how many jobs a worker has completed, where they've completed, ratings information, earnings information. When you combine the identity and the performance data, what you get is predictive insight into how someone will work. Whether Armando likes to work in the mornings or Alicia likes to work in the evenings has an impact on the types of opportunities they may face. Now we bring all of those together into a new worker sourcing tool that allows employers to filter in a way they never could before by identifying the key filters that matter, selecting it, and then we manage the entire messaging side of it. Workers at the same time are able to optimize their interests and preferences. If they like certain industries, they can curate it to that. We're the only platform that owns all three components: screening, sourcing, and performance. This creates a very powerful competitive moat as you start to scale the business from 100,000 workers today to millions of workers down the road. Let's get into a little bit of our metrics. Today, we support over 100 companies in 30 industry verticals, spanning over 100,000 workers. Those are industries like last mile delivery, healthcare, education, event marketing, construction. We're also counter-cyclical. So in the last year, we've grown 5x year over year, doing over $1 million revenue run rate now. We're looking to get that sizably growth in the next few months. From a revenue composition and worker composition side, you'll see that we have delivery and healthcare, our two biggest verticals. On the worker side, it's also among our two biggest. And this is not by chance. We took a strong initiative about a year ago to focus on healthcare, as we saw a lot of that industry moving in that direction of 1099 contract workers. And that's been very beneficial to us through the entire pandemic that's happened. We have a very strong pipeline right now. So we have over 500,000 worker pipeline, 10 million revenue visibility. And our revenue target for this year is to get to 3 million. So you're starting to see nice incremental growth month over month, quarter over quarter. From a team perspective, it was really important for me to work with people that share my value system and understand the passion that we have for the future of work. I've been lucky enough to work with a great team that has experience building, scaling, and exiting businesses before. These are some of the companies we helped build and some of the companies we've worked at. From a financing standpoint, we did a 3 million seed round, which helped us achieve the milestones that we mentioned: 100 companies, 100,000 workers, and $1 million revenue run rate. Today, we're doing a seed extension that will really help us scale up our worker acquisition solution. So not just screening, but sourcing as well. And this will allow us to position the company for profitability. Final takeaway, where we are as a company is kind of, as I mentioned, a ladder up strategy. We focused the first part of our seed round on what we call worker acquisition. That involved screening, data sharing, and sourcing. As we're now starting to get to a point where it's important for us to scale those operations, as we go further in, we can move into employee engagement and retention, and overall then dominate the category. And that's the pitch. So if you have any questions, please fire away.
You guys, there was a lot of jargon in there. It's a great pitch. It's clear, concise, just that we were talking about. It took about less than 10 minutes to get across his whole entire company idea in a short amount of slides. He used a lot of graphics, so that way you guys are focused more on what he was saying rather than what was up on the screen and trying to read it. That way his message comes across more clearly and his story is very digestible, and you're not coming in and out of it after you've read ahead or are catching up. So again, there's a lot of jargon in there. So if you guys have questions, I've been trying to kind of explain them in the chat so you guys understand. But whether it's how to create a go-to-market slide that actually is graphical instead of just words, any kind of questions like that, feel free to put them in the chat. You can do it privately to me. You can do it privately to Rahir, or just unmute yourself or raise your hand.
Yeah, one thing I will tell you guys, having gone through this process of changing presentations multiple times, one of the key areas here is to keep your font sizes really large. So what that does, it forces you to not have a lot of content on the slide, because people don't really, so my major slides don't have much content. So, they're pretty big. Some of these things are more product related, but generally speaking, not a lot of words. It's very easy for you to kind of read it and follow through. So I think that's something really important. We like to use these slide headers just because it gets people's minds to focus on the things that I'm talking about. But, I've taken the same presentation and designed it in 5 slides, and I've done it in 10 slides, and I've done it in 20 slides. So it's just really up to kind of what the requirements are, but what your major points are, and then keep your content small if you can.
And so Maricela has a question. She's asking, what website or software program did you use to get some of the visuals?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is because we work in a collaborative team, and I have a designer on my team and a product people who help us, we actually use Google Worksheets. So Google Presentation, I forget the name of it. It's like Google Worksheets, Google Presentation. So everything's on Google at the same time. And the reason is because you can collaborate. So you can have a master presentation and other people can edit other slides while you're working on one. So it's not like PowerPoint or Microsoft where you have to have a document, you email it to everybody and figure out what version you're on. So that makes us easier. Images, there's a ton of free image sites. I forget which ones we use, but there's a bunch. I can get you the names of ones. Or you can look up, free image, and you could find the databases and you can pull images for that. We don't really have too many images in this presentation. We kind of create most of these, but images like this we get. And then obviously, you can do a lot in Photoshop and stuff. So we darken the image, obviously, as you can tell, so you can focus on what you're looking for. Use the same image twice to kind of tell you a different story. That's a really powerful technique visually. So if there is something you want to do, you can highlight things that way. Using contrasting colors is really important in design. So, we focused on color schemes. Keep a similar color scheme if you can, otherwise it will really throw people off. So, we generally stick to light for the content stuff. Green's our accent color. Black tends to be our thing. This is not even white. This is actually, our designer would kill me if I said it was white. White is probably the screen. This is probably some hue of bluish, grayish color. But that's kind of how we've chosen. We choose like light earth tone colors, and then, darker ones for contrast. And then, simple things that are easy to read. So yeah.
This is as good a presentation for a pitch deck as you guys will ever see. It's one of the best I've ever seen, period. Clean, concise. Here is all about understanding his audience all the way through it. His audience in this case are prospective investors in his company. He drills down very, very complex topics into simple graphics that express the entire concept in a way that someone watching these slides may only spend a minute or two seeing the slide. They got the concept just by looking at the graphic. So it is counterintuitive to think about this, but the fewer words are in a pitch deck, the more time was put into creating. It takes a lot of time, effort, concentration, really kind of thinking it through to be able to boil down these concepts in a way that it's digestible to any audience, regardless of their background, regardless of their technical expertise, etc.
And this took a lot of time and a lot of iteration. So don't think that this is the first thing I did. First thing I did is pretty crappy. So, this took a lot. So this is years in the making and 30, 40, 50 iterations later. So some people, if you're smart enough and lucky enough to be able to distill your ideas into the clearest format, then please, by all means, skip all the nonsense and get to the good stuff. But yeah, it takes a little bit of time.
And we do have some questions, but I just wanted to also jump in and say, your slide deck should be just a summary of your pitch. Most of your content is going to be coming from you and what you're saying. These should be little bullet points that remind you, okay, this is my talking point on this. This is my talking point on that. That's really what you want to be practicing, is exactly what you're going to say when you see 100 companies, 30 industries, 100K workers. You need to know what that means to you and how you can tell people what you mean with that. And so I have a question. Typically how many slides are in a pitch deck? And then also, how many slides does this presentation have?
Good question. Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Well, no, I don't know how many slides Rahir has. I think you have some building ones and you have some in the middle.
So I have 23 in this one. But, if you take out, there's a cover is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slides are just superfluous. So probably closer to like 15 slides of content.
And the more complicated your company or your nonprofit is, you're probably not going to be able to do your go-to-market in one slide. And that's okay. Or explaining the problem that you have or your solution. And that's okay. So while we say, the 11 slide pitch deck is kind of, the basis, of course, but typically it's hard to get by without going 14 to 16 or 17 slides.
Yeah.
So, and
I'll give you an example. Sometimes I have only one slide to talk about the problem. Here I talk about the problem as this, and then this, and then this. 3 slides. Sometimes, and then, for my solution, it's this, right? Sometimes for my problem, it's just this slide. Mm-hmm. So I'll just disregard the other. So one of the things that, is really useful as you guys build your presentation is build the big one first. And then you can say, okay, here's 20 slides. If I need to make it 5, what am I going to include? If I need to make it 10, what am I going to include? And then if I have the luxury of time, what am I going to include? And if you as Alicia said, you should know the content of every slide really well, because what ends up happening then is, if it's a 3-minute presentation, yeah, I can do 5 slides, no problem. If it's a 5-minute pitch, I can do 10 slides. If it's a 10-minute pitch, I can do all of them, because you know which content slides matter most. And some are just leading up. So not all slides are the same. You're telling a narrative. So it's kind of a story arc. So just know that.
And so we have another question for over here. What is a worker pipeline and year-over-year growth?
Yeah, so worker pipeline, what that means is, sometimes when investors look at me today, they look at me and where I am as a snapshot in time. So where the company is today. Now, pipeline is kind of what's ahead. So a lot of people invest today because they think you're going to achieve something in the near term. And pipeline helps them understand how much visibility does the company have ahead. So for example, when I tell someone this slide, what I want them to understand is today we're doing $1 million of revenue. Our near-term target is 3. So if you invest in me today, in the near term, in the next 6 months or so, we can triple our growth with some of the capital you're bringing in. That's really good. And not only that, we have 10 million of visibility. So we're only really shooting for 30% of the target of what we can actually see. So the upside is even better than just the 3 million. And the 10 million of revenue translates to companies that we want to work with or partner with that have 500,000 workers in their database or in their workforce. So if we want to grow our database of workers, because that's really important if you're sourcing talent, then it helps investors understand, okay, the worker count is here, the revenue is here, the potential, and this is what they're shooting for. It's simple focusing of their mind into 3 things. Generally, people work in 3s. So try to put whatever you can in 3s. Don't do 4 or 5. Don't do 2, do 3, if you can.
And another thing that I wanted to jump in on earlier, and we kind of got sidetracked, is you'll notice when Rahir did his pitch, you weren't left with questions. So as you know, using an investor lens, the story that he gave you and the order that he gave it in really kind of built up in a way that you weren't left wondering, okay, so how are you going to go to market? How are you going to secure workers? How are you going to make money? How are you going? All those questions he answered before you even had a chance to ask. And we have another question here. So since our companies do not have revenue or customers yet, how do we show our estimates?
Yeah, lots of companies don't have products or don't have traction when they go raise money or they build a pitch deck. I think the important part is telling the vision of where you want to go and showing where you are in that kind of vision. And then, most companies will probably have some projections. These can be super high level. No one's going to hold you to the fire for them. But the reason they're important to do is you have to understand how is this business going to make money and what is that going to look like over time if I'm successful, right? So people need to understand that. And, there are deeper presentations that we have that support this that go into the unit economics or how do we make money on every dollar I sell. And those are much more detailed. This is just meant, generally thinking this pitch deck is meant for you to say, I'm interested, let's talk. That's really what it's meant to do. And then when we talk again, we can go much deeper into the business, talk about your questions, the finance, the marketing, the operations, the people that you might want to bring on to help you do this. So this is really meant to get that. This is the, I guess you guys are in high school, but when you go to college, you'll be at the bar. This is like at the bar, me talking to you at the bar. And then the next meeting is going on a date. And this is just meant to get me the date, if that analogy makes sense to you guys.
That's awesome. And you guys, you can also, no one here really is going to have, revenue or customers yet. This is, and at one point, Rahir was at this stage.
Yeah, 100%.
No money, with no revenues in and no customers. But what you have to do is tie this into your TAM and SAM slide where you say, okay, my total available market is 1 million people with autism throughout the US. And from there, I think if we're starting in the Arizona market, I think that we can get 10% of the Arizona market, which is 130,000 people. And this is what our projected revenue is if we get only 10% of those. And then, a year later, we're expecting to expand into another state. And this is what our market looks like over there. This is what we expect to capture from that market. And so that's really what you're trying to explain when you don't have revenues or customers yet. You want to show what you expect that you can get that's reasonable. And again, Rahir mentioned they're not going to, investors or donors are not going to hold you to the fire and say, I expected by 2022 that I would have $1 million in revenue by now, and you're not there yet. They're not going to hold you to this, or 130,000 customers by year end. They're not going to hold you to that because they understand that this is, you know, a new company. It's evolving. As you grow, and these are projections.
I think what they want to also do, just keep this in mind, they want to know how you think. And this is the way you are selling the business and the way you think about the business. So as Alicia's talking about your TAM and your SEM stuff, you know, that's proving to them that you've thought about this business in deeper level than just, I have an idea, right? I think they want to see how you've thought through that. And someone can argue with you about those numbers, but it's more just a representation of how you think.
Absolutely. The numbers that you put on there, you know, on the flip side, you don't want to overinflate what you're going to be doing either and be disappointed. So don't think that you can just throw some numbers and say there's 1 million people and I'm going to have half of them by the end of the year in 6 months. That's not reasonable, right? So you have to find that balance of, you know, it's reasonable and logical, but it's also, you know, enticing enough for them to have a good return on the end, but you're also not overinflating numbers where they're going to be, you know, not attainable at all.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions, you guys? Perfect. Well, Rahir, thank you so much. Oh, we actually do have another question. After these last questions for Rahir, so we can let him go since he is busy trying to, you know, get all of these guys in his pipeline set up with his company. We'll go into the good and bad pitches that we have lined up for you as more examples in just a little bit. So Alan is asking, in determining what is reasonable, is it wise to look at competitors and their markets?
Absolutely. But let me ask you, reasonable about what? Your market size or your revenue projections or what? I think competitive analysis is always good, but I guess I'd want to understand specifically which one. What are you asking at?
He's asking about market size.
Market size. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Understanding, you know, most industries in the world have what's called Pareto optimality, where 20% tend to cover 80% of the market. That tends to be a normal rule. Some markets are different. So understanding what the big players are doing definitely helps you understand the size of the market. You know, I will always tell you, it doesn't matter if you have big players in the game. Good example from all of you guys, we're all on Zoom. You know who had an 18-year head start on Zoom? Skype. You know, somehow Skype dropped the ball on this, and Zoom was able to come in, you know, a few years ago and dominate. So I would never be worried about, you know, big companies existing in your market or bigger nonprofits doing what you're doing. That just demonstrates that there is a need, there is commercial viability for it. And if you have a better way to do it that adds more value, then people will gravitate to your solution.
And that's the key, making sure that you have a better, more efficient product than what is already out there. If you're going to go into a competitive space, a saturated space, if you will, then you have to come in with something better. You can't just recreate Facebook tomorrow exactly as is and expect that people are going to change their behavior and change their social media platform for that reason alone. It has to be the better version of it, which is why Instagram became popular after Facebook. They figured out that Facebook, most people commented and liked the photos. So they thought, okay, well, why don't we just do a photo thing? And so they learned, and then they made that product better.
Yep.
And that's why they were able to be successful. And then it says, I have another question. On a pitch deck, should you mention your sources?
I don't think it's necessary. You could do an appendix if you want at the end of it, which has sources listed. But, you know, generally, I err on the side of less clutter, right? The only thing I have really is my Turn logo on the bottom of it. I don't really have footnotes or anything. It just clutters it up. I generally prefer the clean screen to the best of your ability. So I would say you don't have to. I mean, you can keep it later. Definitely have it ready. If someone asks, where did you get it? You can say, oh, I read a McKinsey report or I did it from here. But on the pitch deck, you probably don't need to.
And I would agree. There have been pitches that I've been in or a part of where investors are asking, okay, well, that's interesting and I haven't read that before. Can you send me that article, or where did you get that piece of information? So it's good to make sure that you keep a record of those things in case that happens. But most of the time, investors, donors, it's a grant setter, they're going to be looking into this themselves and doing their own due diligence. They're not going to just accept everything that you say. They're going to go and do their own research. So if they can find it on their own, that's fine. But we have had people ask in the past, can you send me over that source or that resource? Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on to a next section where we're going to show you examples of really terrible and really awesome slides as individual examples. But before Rahira leaves us, if you guys could either unmute or hit your reaction button, a round of applause thanking Rahira for having done this today.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go share screen.
It's open, yeah, by any means.
And okay, so what we're going to do here is a quick exercise to give you guys examples of some slides that companies really use. These are all real companies, many of which are still in existence. Slides that they've used for purposes of their own investor pitches. Most of the slides are bad. Some of the slides are laughably terrible. A couple of the ones I put in here are good examples of what a good pitch looks like. But I think from right here, you guys got to see what a really good pitch looks like. So let's start off. This first one is a company by name of Moz. And you'll notice that, oh my God, it goes all the way back to 1981 and describes Jillian, who's Rand's mom, found something or other. Who cares about that? It's just confusing, too much data. This looks like exactly the opposite of what you guys just saw with Rahira's presentation. On top of that, you notice the whole bottom of this has some unnecessary text that they've added into it. This slide is terrible. Okay, so here is a really poorly designed architecture slide for a software product. So unless somebody is really deeply technical, they're not going to follow the jargon soup that exists on here, and it doesn't make it clear for any non-technical audience, typically an investor audience, doesn't make it clear what problem they're actually trying to solve.
And investors, just keep in mind, or donors, whoever your audience is, they may not always be a domain expert, right? Or technical. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're using terminology and explaining things in a way that anyone can understand without knowing too much about that domain. So that should be your problem slide. That should be your solution slide, is kind of saying, you know, this is the problem that I'm solving. If you didn't know, in healthcare, X, Y, and Z is occurring, and this is how I'm solving it. And this is why it's important, because no one else is doing it. That's kind of what you want your story to sound like if you are in something that does need a lot of background in order to explain it to people who are not.
In some level, at some level, it isn't even a question of being technical. I've been in high tech all my life. I have no idea what a hypervisor agnostic is. vSphere, KVM, and Hyper-V, never heard of that stuff, right? So it's not even a question of being technical even. It's a question of you have to be so deeply in the particular narrow slice of domain to be able to understand the slide that for 99% of the cases, you're going to completely lose your audience.
And so after learning what we learned from Rahir and some of these slides here in our last pitch presentation examples, why don't we make this a little more interactive, where we're going to ask you guys what's good about this and what's bad about the slides as well, so that you guys can jump in either again on chat or unmute yourself and chime in.
Yeah, a lot of you have had questions about TAM slides. This TAM slide is awesome. This was from Airbnb's. Airbnb had is a famously good presentation, but you see how simple it is. There's very few words on here. You immediately get the fact that this is a really huge opportunity. And it's obvious from these simple 3 circles how they derive what the opportunity is. So any comments about this slide? Okay, so the next one, I'm going to use Alicia's method. What's good and bad about this one? This was a company, I'll give you a background. This is a company called Caddy, and what it did is it was a two-faced marketplace. In other words, it on the one hand, golfers could log into a website, and then also golf courses could make tee times available on that site. So it's a two-sided marketplace. And as a result of that, the golfers would be able to get tee times and, you know, special deals, et cetera. By the same token, the golf courses wound up getting information about, not only do they fill their tee times, but also they get information, invaluable information about their target customers. In other words, once they have that data about that golfer, they have it forever as a result of this app. Now, what is good and what is bad about this slide?
Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was on mute. So Maricela is saying, good, simple visual. It's not overwhelming. Agreed. Ava says it gives simple cues for the presenter to know what to talk about. Straight to the point. Agreed. 100%. They've somehow managed to capture a few sentences worth of information and put it into a graphic that, even without context really in this deck, you can understand what their go-to-market strategy is, what their idea is here.
So this one gets a smiley face. Do I even need to say what's wrong with this one? Oh my God, what were they thinking? Right? And again, this was a real company. It was acquired by Silicon Valley Bank, which is the largest what's called a venture debt bank. What the company actually does, Standard Treasury, is they provided a programming interface for banks that use this software to be able to do transfers of money between accounts, between banks and between individual accounts. That's what the company was. So, comments about the good and bad about this slide.
And I had someone ask me via email just last night about what they should be putting on for their financials. They had an issue with their P&L not fitting on the slide and being readable. And again, you know, I pointed to what John was saying, is that just put the big details on there for 3 years. John, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would simply put the total revenues, total expenses, and net profits. So, and if it's, assuming it's 3 years, that would be 9 figures in 3 columns, which that will allow you much bigger font size. Well, including you'll have the identifier being revenues, expenses, and profits. So you'll have really 4 columns, the category and the 3 years.
Perfect.
Any more comments about this awful slide?
All right, on to the next one.
So we're going to call these kind of slides the anti-turn slides. So they're exactly the opposite. In all the ways that turn slides were fantastic, these are terrible. what Wedding Lovely does is it provides a web portal to be able to manage the entire kind of planning cycle for a wedding. Everything from, you see the engagement ring on the left, and then it goes into excruciating detail around all of these steps leading up to the actual wedding day. I think what they were thinking here is that, man, they could show how complex it is by putting enough, just slapping enough words on this slide. But this could just as easily been summarized as a series of bullet points indicating the big chunks of things that need to happen toward a wedding. Any other comments with this one?
Yes, we have some, Maricela saying too much info, kind of distracting when points should be simple and concise. And I agree 100%. That is just, it's overwhelming to look at. And that the last feeling that you want to give your audience, whether it's an investor, donor, anyone, is a feeling of overwhelming and clutter and all of that kind of, you know, needless junk. So 100%, Maricela, kudos.
And there is, I'll leave it to you guys to later figure out, there is one particularly laughable bullet in this list, which when you guys catch it, you'll think, what in the world were these people thinking when they wrote this slide? But I'll leave it to the audience to go figure out which point that is. I think Alicia got it because she's smiling.
I can't, well, no, I can't even read it. I'm a few inches from my computer. I really can't even see any of the letters. It just looks like they're, yeah, it looks like I need glasses, and I've got 20/15 vision, so. All right, so Alan's saying, what could spreading this timeline over multiple slides do? Not much. What they're trying to do with that slide, Armando, can you go back?
Yeah, I did.
You really just want to summarize it. You really want the key points. It's more, you're going to say in your speech and in your presentation via words how much work it is, rather than saying that. You could summarize it by saying there are 116 different decisions that someone has to make from the time they get engaged to the day that they get married. And that would make sense, right? There are 40 different kinds of vendors you have to work with, or this. That's what you want to do, rather than we're here putting a timeline like this out saying we work with people in healthcare, we work with people like this. He says 30 plus industries. That summarizes it. Then if they have questions about what industries or what kind of things, then you can kind of get into that. So
the other thing I was going to add is that having more visual and more cues allows you to be a storyteller. You want to be a storyteller to some degree on each slide. And the more text information you put, the more they're going to be distracted looking at the slide and not listening to you. So you're actually hurting your ability to be a storyteller.
And so
in fact, what you could do on this slide is to try and boil it down to a group of stuff that needs to get done, like booking services. And that has a whole bunch of stuff associated with it. If you just block it off into maybe just a bubble with the big block of stuff that needs to get done and a bunch of those bubbles on the page, you'll get the same idea across.
Agreed. Okay, so moving on.
Okay. So comments about this one? So what they're trying to do here is getting across how much they're trying to raise and how much has been committed so far and how much more they need to get a commitment. And the second thing that they're doing is saying, how will that money be spent? So this is a little bit wordier than any of the turn slides. So from that perspective, not great. On the other hand, it's not terrible. It's kind of a so-so slide. Any comments about this? Okay. Anybody want to volunteer how else they would? By the way, Alicia, I can't see the chats as they're going because I'm doing the screen sharing. So
We were talking about the bullet that you were talking about, and someone said, haha, send to STDs. And I was like, yeah, those are save the dates. You should, though, maybe not use that kind of acronym when investors may not, they may be common in the wedding field, right? The STDs, but it's not probably something that you want to put on your slides in case someone is not in.
And an investor's going to get so stuck on how stupid it was to put that on the slide that they'll never get past it. They'll be like, look what you put on the slide. That's hilarious.
So Alan then is saying, so on this slide, they could make the sentences a bit shorter, some not essential information on it. And I agree. I've seen cleaner ones. This one's okay, but I have seen much cleaner ones, especially when you're, asking for money. That's, you do want to be very, clear and concise. And so that's why we kind of talked about the pie chart is something that I commonly advise people to use for the use of funds. So instead of all of these words here that's circled, even though they like it, and I can see why it's not a lot of words, you could just put that into a pie chart that says this chunk is sales, this part is marketing, this part is hiring new development, this is etc. So Alan, I agree with you. And then Ava's saying aesthetically pleasing, even though it includes long sentences, it doesn't distract me from the main point they're trying to convey. And she's right. Ava, you are absolutely right. It is still readable. It could be improved, but it's overall, I wouldn't tell someone that they absolutely have to change that kind of slide.
Well, I'll comment here is when I first did these, my mistake was writing sentences, and I've learned to use one or two words to convey a sentence. There's for the most part, in fact, that was great about Turn. Turn had almost no sentences. It had a few words that conveyed a concept, and he spoke the sentences.
Mm-hmm.
There is one other problem on this slide, which is the only thing you really need on this slide is to say that you're raising $750,000 to $1 million. That's all you really need to say. As far as what is committed, et cetera, well, guess what? That's going to change from the time you present it to the next time you present it because you're raising money. So all that other information in here, the 350K committee, where did it come from, all that kind of stuff, that should be communicated verbally. There's no reason for it to be actually on the slide.
Mm-hmm. And so, when it says full-time business development / senior engineer to help with the demand of what we are seeing, that's nice, but just putting business development kind of works. And if they have questions on, okay, so when you say business development, what do you mean? What kind of allocation out of your raise is going to be set for this? And then you can go into, well, we need a full-time person because we have such great demand. We really need to turn, this interest into actual revenues and customers. That kind of allows the people that you're speaking with to be more engaged and interactive as well, rather than having them just read this and go, oh, okay, full-time. To John's point, business development would have been a great bullet and much more simple to put down. So
Square. Now I will tell you something about this slide. This came from a deck. Many of you may be familiar with Square, but in any event, you've certainly seen it. That's that little device that you see attached to that mobile phone that allows you to be able to read a credit card. And so they do credit card processing in a way that all you really need is a cell phone and you're good to go as a small retailer. They've been enormously successful. And this is not a great slide. Having said that, they did raise $100 million on this pitch. So clearly, despite it not being the best possible slide, they were ultimately successful in raising the money that they needed. In fact, today, Square is a public company worth billions of dollars. So now, what is wrong with this slide?
Well, and they've pointed out some of the things like the weird color gradient. It's really difficult to read the first sentences, the black on that purple. That's really difficult to read. And this whole thing, if someone was speaking to me about their proposition and what they were doing, I would be staring at this slide trying to translate it and understand. It's really distracting, and I feel like they could have found a simple way to remind themselves and keep the focus back on them, because I'm not even a part of the pitch and I'm still just I can't focus on anything else.
The other problem in here is this circle of life kind of graphic. If you actually read what the text is in this cycle, they're not a cycle at all. They may be things that build on each other, like, for example, having experienced management team allows you to build a solid business. But this graphic actually doesn't tie at all, or the concept behind the graph doesn't tie at all to the actual concept.
And so we have a question. I feel like we are mainly talking about products, but what about services? Would all of these examples be in line with the service? Yeah, 100%. It's still going to be the clear, concise, graphically focused kind of, bullet points slide. So everything here, whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, if you're a product, an application, a SaaS company, or a services company, or some combination thereof, how you're going to put your pitch presentation together is going to be exactly the same. You're going to follow the same kind of storyline. You're going to keep it clear, concise, simple. Like I said, graphically focused. It really all does still tie in. Services sometimes have a little bit more complicated models, so you may have a few extra slides, but that's, really, it really translates well. This is just kind of standard how to build a great pitch deck. And again, your pitch deck and how you choose to represent your company business plan and your nonprofit business plan, they're still going to be really in line. So, and it's not everything. The graphics are not everything. What's really important is the content, as evidenced by this exact slide, and the fact the company is now public and that they were able to raise millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars into their business despite having a graphically poor pitch presentation. It really comes down to the content. That is the most important thing. But this kind of gives you a leg up with investors so that they can see and hear you more clearly, because they're also investing in you and not just the business plan. So this is kind of a representation of both you and your team and the business plan.
Okay. This is a competitive. I tried to do a sampling of financial one, a competitive one, landscape slide, etc. This is a particularly bad competitive landscape slide. So any comments about what's wrong with this slide? Well, certainly I have no idea how Buffer fits into any of this stuff. The company name is Buffer. They appear on this slide in this intelligence sharing and the sharing platform space, those two places. They don't appear anywhere else on here. So I don't really get how they fit against anything else. Plus they have these massive companies, Twitter, Google, LinkedIn, Facebook. Does that mean that they're competing with them, or how do they fit into totally confusing chart to me. It gives me absolutely no information about how they fit in the competitive landscape in their market.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I completely agree. And we've got Sahil saying too, what are the slides? What are the grouping in the middle? All the logos in the middle. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, this is just awful. Just awful slide. Okay, this goes back to John's comment. No sentences. And you have you're going to spend all your time as you're presenting the slide. And once again, at any given time, you're only going to be presenting any one slide for maybe a minute. That entire minute is going to be spent reading the slide and not listening to the presenter.
Well, yeah, and not only that, they use things like while using game mechanics to encourage and reward users for experiencing new things. They pointed out on here too, but that's so vague that it doesn't tell me anything about the company. I still don't understand what you mean by that whole sentence, and that's a long sentence to put on a slide.
And yeah, to encourage and reward users for experiencing new things. What in the world does that mean?
Is that eating out at a restaurant? Is that, you know, going skydiving? I don't know what you're talking about. You know, can you be more specific, please, is what I would ask.
So again, this is another slide that I don't need to tell you why it's so terrible. Gangsta, really? This is you know, certainly high tech has been accused of having a bro culture. I think all they were trying to do with that slide is to live up to the stereotype. Awful. Gives the impression these people are not professionals.
Exactly. That was going to be my comment, is that is in no way professional at all. And yes, you can be casual and, you know, start the conversation off with a more personal related topic, etc. But that is just, yeah, it's really, really unprofessional.
Any comments from anyone about this one? The only thing they're missing on this slide is a reference to each other as being dudes. Other than that, they've got all the worst stuff in here. All right, so this is another famously good pitch deck. The Uber pitch deck was really well done. And you can see that they didn't exactly spend a whole lot of effort against developing graphics here. But what they did do is that they remembered who their audience is. Their audience are investors. So for an investor, if I'm convincing them to put in some money, help me understand what my upside is, but also what my downside is. And in Uber's case, this was before Uber was Uber. It was called Uber Cab originally. And it was a black car service that existed in San Francisco, and that's it. So they said, our worst case is we got 10 cars, 10 drivers, and we got 100 clients, and it's a great service for San Francisco executives. That's our downside, is we never get beyond that. However, what if we go big? And so what they did is they picked a go big scenario, and then they also pick a Midland one. Now, the person who developed this, was named Kaepernick, wound up completely imploding his career later in Uber's history. And one of the ways that he imploded is that he picked up a reputation of not being honest, not being thoughtful, overall not being a good human being. It's almost surprising that early Uber had such a direct and honest slide that was actually part of their deck. It actually, at some level, doesn't even jive with that CEO's eventual reputation as an executive.
But being honest is a great thing. And, you know, you will get that question from investors, especially really sophisticated investors. And this will be likely down the line. It won't happen every time, but eventually, especially during due diligence. But sometimes on your initial pitch presentation, people will say, okay, so what is the worst case scenario? Or what's my downside here? What's the risk? What is my risk in here? What weaknesses do you see that your company has? And how are you going to mitigate that? And you have to be prepared for that question. If they you, what are my risks here? What are the potential risks for the company to fail? And, you know, those weak points of failure, if you don't know those and they're asking you that question, that's not going to be great for you. And so Maricela is saying they brought in the worst case scenario, but if you want to stay positive and optimistic when asking someone to take a chance and fund you, I agree. I would put, if I even put that on a slide, which I wouldn't put in my slide, I would put it in the appendix for just in case I got asked that question. You don't want to say during your first initial pitch, especially if you weren't asked this question, what the worst case scenario is. I personally wouldn't do it, but I would have an answer prepared for it.
And what he was trying to do here is this is the very first pitch that Uber did as a company. So they were raising a very tiny amount of money. So what he was trying to express here is that, look, for the amount of money you're investing, worst case, we're going to get a cash flowing business that will wind up resulting in some dividends back to the investors. So there is an asset value there, even in our worst case. That's what he was trying to say with this slide. But I agree with Alicia. It's a risky strategy. It's a very risky strategy to be, because you could wind up having your investors really focus in on that worst case scenario. But obviously, Uber pulled off this slide. They were able to raise their money, and away they went. $11.5 billion in total funding later, public company, still hasn't made a dime. But they did build a company that changed transportation worldwide forever. So, any comments about this one? This is a company, I should give some context. This is a company that was providing information services for the restaurant industry. So I'll make some comments on it. Number one, again, with the bro culture, right? This is, you can almost envision this CEO thumping his chest and yelling, 50 freaking billion, everyone eats. You know, this is not professional. Number two, what's it even mean? How do you come up with 50 freaking billion? Right? Where did that number, where that TAM, this is a TAM slide, obviously. How do they derive that number? There's no indication at all other than they pulled a number completely out of the air.
Right. And everyone,
this is awful.
I think what they're trying to do here is say, you know, our market is huge because everybody eats. In the whole world, everyone eats. But that's not relevant, and that's a really terrible TAM example, because it's not realistic. You can't go, everyone in the entire world is my potential customer. It's just not true.
And certainly lose the word freaking. There's no need for that word to be in there. Okay, so I ran through just a few examples. There are more in the slide deck that you guys already received on how to build a pitch deck. I included the entire article that goes through. I just picked 10, 12 examples out of, I think in that article, they actually go through 31 examples. So it's pretty comprehensive. And you'll get, but after a while, I think it becomes a recurrent theme. Number one is understand your audience. If this is an investor pitch deck, be sensitive to what an investor is going to be worried about. It's specifically, it's the fact that he's going to want a return on his investment. Now, if your pitch is toward a foundation, it may be a different set of metrics, because that audience is not looking at a return on investment. They're looking at impact per dollar invest. So it's a different measurement. So understand who your audience is. Number two, I think we've really hammered this one home to death, is be concise. Graphics work much better. And I love this Mark Twain quote. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. It takes way more work to be concise, to be able to come up with those killer simple graphics like what Rahir did with Turn. It takes time to be able to do that. And to be fair about it, Rahir also said, this is probably the 40th version of his pitch deck. So it's been refined over an extended period of time. We don't expect that your presentations are going to have that level of refinement. Mm-hmm. But just put in the back of your minds that graphics work. Fewer words work. Let your the verbal words that you're saying be a companion to the slide, not fight the slides.
And so you guys, as we're running, it's 2:08. Did we have anybody that wanted to practice their pitch and get some feedback? If so, just raise your hand, unmute yourself, chat, because I know this is part of it. Our presentations went a little bit long. I know it was a lot of content, but I also want to be able to talk to you a little bit about our practicing for the final pitch presentations before our next practice, which is our last practice. So just go ahead, raise your hand, unmute yourself. Let us know in chat if you guys wanted to present and get some feedback.
Well, I'm going to ask for some feedback. Were these going through these example slides helpful for you guys?
We're getting a lot of yeses. That's great. Very helpful. Absolutely awesome. Okay, well, you guys, while anyone, talks to their team members and is figuring out if they want to go ahead and present and get some feedback, I am just going to go over the email that I sent you guys, just in case you didn't get it. So as you guys know, this is coming up, we're coming up quickly for business plans to be due on the 17th. There was some confusion where it looked like it was the 21st on the schedule, and things have changed. So if you guys are a little bit late in getting those in, we understand for the confusion, but they were supposed to be due tomorrow, and then we have pitch presentations that are due the 21st. So if you can't get your business plan submissions, not your pitch presentation submissions in by the 17th, that's okay. Just reach out, let us know. But otherwise, please email them to John or myself, or actually, if you could copy both of us, that would be great. We have our next group meeting on July 20th. And so that's another practice session. We do want everyone here to participate. If you don't want to do that here today, we understand. We did give you a lot to think about. You might want to make some refinements, etc., before you feel comfortable. We understand, but we do encourage everybody to join on July 20th. We want to practice this as if it's our final pitch presentations that are being recorded. And if you're a top team, it's going to be played for the closing ceremony. So make sure that if you can, that you join us on July 20th, same Zoom meeting. I also want to let you guys know that your team will need your videos on while you're presenting. Just in case you are one of the top teams, we want to make sure that you guys are seen, that we see your lovely faces, that you have a quiet background, that it is nice and clean, that there aren't dirty t-shirts, thrown over the chair behind you, etc., or that, you've got loud TVs on the background, whatever it is. Just make sure that you're cognizant of what your screen looks like, so that at the closing ceremony where there's, friends, family, general public, there's great speakers, etc., that it looks clean and professional. And so you want to also dress professionally as well, like you were in person presenting and going up on stage and getting an award and all of that. So, make sure you just comb up your hair, that your t-shirt doesn't have stains all over it. Business casual or semi-professional is good. You don't have to be dressed to the nines in a, tuxedo or a nice tailored business suit, but something nice and professional, something that you would wear to a closing award ceremony in person would be great. If you want to have your family and friends there to watch you collect your awards and see your presentation, etc., then make sure that you have them RSVP at the website that I sent you in that email. They will need RSVP. This one's going to be password protected since it is a more generally available event. We want to make sure that we're not getting anybody, weird in. We want to make sure that we know who's coming in. Let's see. And you guys, the format, 10 minutes to present is what you have. One team member, as we said, will present the pitch and do the pitch by themselves. It doesn't have to be your team captain. It can just be whoever feels the most comfortable speaking publicly. We'll go ahead and then call your name to present by your team name. So we'll say, please welcome Team Aspire or Team Movement. That's Inspired Movement. That's what we're going to say. You should already have queued up your presentation. So we're going to allow screen sharing. If anyone doesn't know how to share their screen or doesn't feel comfortable, reach out to me. I'll kind of go over Zoom with you, but have it queued up so that you're ready to go and screen share that. If you can't or you don't feel comfortable screen sharing, you can always send me your presentation and I'll have it queued up for you just in case. But it's a lot easier for you to go at your own pace when you can click next yourself and not have to say next to someone else, right? So
Well,
go ahead.
Alicia, the schedule said that they had to give their pitch presentation the 21st, which would be before the actual pitches. So we'll technically have each one, correct?
Right. But I'm just trying to say, if you guys can share your own as you're going through and speaking, it's going to save a lot of time for you and and it's easier not to get thrown off when you're in control of, going forward or going backwards. It's a lot easier. And so we do suggest doing that. If you need a little Zoom tutorial, just let me know. And we can go through that. I can also set up a separate kind of Zoom if for anyone who is not comfortable yet with these features and how to work them. I'm happy to give a tutorial on that.
Well, I would suggest everyone do multiple times where the person presenting does sharing with the rest of his team and practice within your own team. And so you can get, as well as you can have family members review that. So you can simulate doing the actual pitch presentation to your own team and to friends and family.
Yes. And then, so Alan's asking, will we have time on Monday to give practice pitch presentations to the mentors? Yes. So that's really what we want to do on Monday, on the 20th, when we do our final practice session, is we want all the teams to be there and actually practice, do the slide share. We're going to queue you up, where this is going to be a run through of basically the 22nd and 23rd when we're doing these recordings. So we'll announce you guys will have your slides queued up. One person will give the pitch. We'll all give you guys a little bit of feedback, and then we'll go on to the next team. So we just want to kind of run through and make sure that we can do this quickly and easily. Maricela is asking if we'll be marked down if we run under 10 minutes. No, it just means you got it done pretty quickly. Rahir's was just under 10 minutes and he got all of his points across really well. So we're not going to mark you down for going under 10 minutes. That just means you'll probably have more time for feedback and questions and answers from the judges. Just try to make sure you get as much as you can into your pitch presentation for your business plan. So
make sure you're under 10 minutes. That I see that happen all the time with presenters. They run long and they never are able to get to the main points of their presentation because they run out of time.
Right. Okay. And I have questions flying in. Hold on. Let me get through the rest of this email really quick for those of you who didn't read it. So when we call your team name, that is your cue to share your screen. Make sure that you have that queued up and ready to go. I'm going to try in the chat to let you know beforehand that we're running up on the time to let you know, but that it may not be possible with me trying to juggle everything back here. So when you do come on to give your pitch presentation, please introduce yourself like Rahir did. Introduce your team members, your team name, and the name of your company or nonprofit. So for example, I said, hi, I'm Alicia Holmes. I'm from Team Aspire. My teammates are XYZ, and we are excited to present the name of our company here. Q&A goes for 5 minutes. The judges and the panel of judges will have time to ask you questions more in depth on your business plan. Then they will just give you feedback on, this was great. Maybe you could refine or improve this, etc. So let's see, the latest question, Alina is asking, when will the Zoom videos be on YouTube? All of the ones except for the last practice pitch presentations or how to create a pitch presentation are up already on the YouTube channel, which I think is in the Dropbox for you guys. This one should be up hopefully by tomorrow after we have a chance to go through and just condense it down and edit it. let's see, are the mentors who are helping us in the judging panel? No, they have conflict of interest. And I know this is an off-topic question, nothing is, but on the rubric it says that business plans must be 12 size Arial font. I'm presuming that still holds true. For the written business plans, yes, it's, you know, within those parameters. If that's, I don't see that as being, you know, too much of
Well,
an issue though.
I'll comment at 20 pages. You got 20 pages with 12 font Arial. That's plenty of space to convey your business model. So we wanted to have somewhat of a limitation. The one exception is if you have references, if you want to use references, that can be over the 20 limit. So covering the 12 sections in the how to write a business plan, that 12 sections we need to have limited to 20 pages.
Perfect. But that obviously does not apply to your pitch presentations. We do want to be able to see these. So actually you should probably use something bigger than a size 12 since we're going to be screen sharing so that people can read it. So that's the difference. The written business plan portion that is due tomorrow, if you haven't done it or you thought it was the 21st, we'll give you a little bit of an extension, but the written part should be in the 12 font Arial. And the pitch presentations, it's up to you. You guys have graphic design control over whatever it is that you want to do. Just make sure it is readable. So, all right, any last questions? I feel like that was just rapid fire here.
Well, I do want to make sure that everybody does have the link to the existing video. So I'm putting the YouTube link up right now.
Perfect.
That contains,
Alicia, I'm sorry.
that is a playlist for the videos that are up. There are 7 of them up so far, and I think there's only 1 or 2 missing at this point. And I'll get it done either by tomorrow or certainly over the weekend.
Alicia, we also had the question about how to send the business plans. Do you want to cover that?
Yeah, well, how about everyone just sends them to the 2 of us, just copy John and then myself. I'm putting our email addresses in case you guys don't have them in the chat right now for you.
And for some people's emails, there's space limitation. So what I found, like for example, PowerPoint, if I save a PowerPoint to a PDF file, it's easier to send it over. But you can also email us if you're having difficulty. You'll get a message that the size is too large for the file you're trying to send, and just send it to us and we can have it sent via Dropbox.
Yes, absolutely. So I think those are the 2 best options. PowerPoint, just export it to a PDF. Pretty simple. If you're not quite sure how to do that, just email me. I will give you the instructions. Or you can also Google it too. That would be Entrepreneur 101, is that you do a lot of Googling, things you don't know. If you have Dropbox too, you can always send it as a Dropbox link. So that's another option. So any last questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. You have our emails. If you need anything, let us know. You guys take care, stay safe and healthy, and we will see you all Monday, if not before then. Thanks, guys.
And go for it, gangsta.
Oh gosh, not like
Oh,
that.
gosh.
Stay professional. Stay professional. Okay.